for the 10-year reunion where we take a close look at the decade in New York sports. Up first today is the Jets. They kicked off the decade with back-to-back appearances in the AFC Championship game, but only posted one more winning season since. Despite an under 500 record for the decade, some big names have worn the green and white since 2010. ESPN Jets reporter Rich Cimini was tasked with compiling the Jets' all-decade team. So we start with the head coach, and yes, it's Rex Ryan. 37-43 this decade, but he still led the Jets to the postseason in 2010 and had 3 seasons of 500 or better football. Plus, he was one of the most colorful personalities in New York sports. Mark Sanchez getting the nod under center, a 25-22 record from 2010 to 2012, and led the decade in passing yards and touchdowns for the Jets. His tenure was a lot shorter than expected. As for the rest of Rich's offense, Chris Ivory occupies the backfield. Eric Decker, Brandon Marshall, and Santonio Holmes are 3 of the Jets' top 4 receiving TD leaders, and Dustin Keller is your tight end. 2 all-time Jet greats take up 2 spots on the offensive line. D'Brickashaw Ferguson and Nick Mangold racked up a combined 7 Pro Bowls during this decade. As for the other side of the ball, a solid defensive line led by Muhammad Wilkerson, who led the decade with 44.5 sacks. At linebacker, David Harris was #1 in tackles each year from 2010 to 2016, and Gang Green certainly misses Demario Davis. And some no-brainers at defensive back. Darrelle Revis and Antonio Cromartie were 2 of the best corners over the last 10 years, while Jamal Adams is the only current Jet to make Rich's list. And now to some special teams. Rich's kicker is Nick Folk, Locke Edwards is the punter, and the late Joe McKnight is the kick returner. And speaking of Rich, here he is in studio making your Thread debut today as well, Rich.
Very excited, yes. Thank you for having me.
Always love having Rich.
Yes.
And Rich didn't get the memo, by the way, about wearing plaid on the show today. I don't know if you realized that. Rich came very, very nicely dressed in a suit.
Yeah.
Not like us, unfortunately.
Always
good. Yes, exactly. Always good to have Rich here in the flesh, though. And look, you know, when taking a look back at the last 10 years of the Jets here, there was really one thing, guys, that stood out to me, and that was the Jets were not that good at football. I mean, think about it. I mean, 9 straight years of playoff futility or thereabouts. Does it seem like 9 years to you?
No, I mean, it seems like the other day I was just walking out of, Heinz Field when they were in the championship game. And I actually talked to Rex Ryan today, and we were reminiscing about that a little bit. Very painful memory from him. But who thought that that would be their last shot? You figured, oh, they're going to go back every year. They got a good team, a quarterback, a coach. That was it.
You know, it's funny. You look at the quarterback carousel, and my goodness, it's a who's who here for the decade. Sanchez, I think, is the guy. You end up now with Sam Darnold. But in between, let's just throw out some names. Tebow, Geno, Petty, Hackenberg, Fitzpatrick. I mean, should we go on? It's incredible. You could do a book alone on just the Jets quarterbacks of the decade.
Oh, boy. You mentioned Tebow. He never actually played quarterback, which is like an entirely different story. We could write a book on that. And, it's been and that's the main reason why the Jets have been so bad is just the instability at the most important position. And if you don't have it, you're not a winning team.
And you look back at some of these drafts, I mean, it's hideous. It's awful. And you wonder why a team, the coach of the decade had a losing record within the decade, that they end up with that kind of situation.
I mean, like, honestly, like, who's their best draft pick of the decade? I was looking through it this morning, and I'd probably say Muhammad Wilkerson, even though he had a bad ending with the Jets, but he did make a Pro Bowl, and he lasted a pretty long time. But other than that, maybe Jamal Adams will be there someday, maybe Sam Darnold, but a lot of bad picks.